Prophecy fulfilled in Syria. That is the bold cover of our latest Trumpet print magazine. We're going to dive in and discuss it on today's Trumpet World. Welcome back to Trumpet World. There have been some massive events in Germany, some events we almost interrupted our regular schedule to discuss with the Christmas market attack coming in on Friday. However, I had the opportunity to guest host the Trumpet Daily Show yesterday and talked about it then. So if you want to get the latest on what was happening in Germany and how Germany is changing before our eyes, you could go back and look at that. On today's show, we have what is becoming some of my favorite Trumpet World episodes, where we're going to look at the latest Trumpet print edition. This just went to the press last week. It should be just about up on our website now. And this is a bit of a special issue for us. The February issue is always our anniversary issue. We, of course, do give you the latest, at least at time of printing, news, the most important news, but also a bit of a look at our work and some of the milestones that we have had. So this latest Trumpet print, the cover is, of course, Prophecy Fulfilled in Syria, about the dramatic fall of Bashar al-Assad. And I'm joined today to discuss this by Philip Nice. Last time we had Philip on the show, we were talking about fulfilled prophecy, why God gives Bible prophecy, what it means for you in the wake of Donald Trump's dramatic win in the US presidential election, a very direct, dramatic fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And this magazine is similar in some ways, as we have another very direct, specific fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And this article recaps the way that Mr. Fleury, all the way back in 2011, 2012, was saying that Syria would end up allied with Europe. Keep your eye on Germany, he wrote. Right now, Syria is Iran's most important regional ally, but that is about to change. Bible prophecy reveals that very soon Syria will no longer align with Iran. That happened. And so we have another issue that looks at the power of Bible prophecy. And we have another opportunity to talk about that on today's show.
Right. I mean, after last issue, one might think that we'd take an issue off from the dramatic prophecies, that are you can splash across the cover, no misunderstanding it. But one dramatic prophecy with President Trump coming back to power, and then this very specific event that a lot of people were watching just because of how dramatic it was. I mean, people without any interest in or awareness of prophecy or really much awareness of Middle East news. This is something that jumps out, I think, at a lot of people. They know about the Syrian civil war going on for, I don't know if it's 14 years or something like that, but long, grinding, horrible civil war. This is a man who has gassed his own people. He's one of the true villainous, wicked dictators out there. So a lot of people have kind of watched the news in Syria for that reason. But then just suddenly, dramatically, this grinding war that just seemed to have no end to it, the rebels just won. The rebels just suddenly took all the remaining government strongholds. Bashar al-Assad is running away, fleeing to Russia, and the rebels just are, they're in there with their smartphones exposing his luxury car collection, his bunkers beneath the bunkers, how he and his family have lived in opulence, and just so for a lot of people it just kind of jumped out of the news, I think, and you were just fascinated to see this example of human tyranny and oppression just shot on a smartphone, and an inside look that a lot of people haven't gotten. But for us, it was transfixing, if that's a word, for a totally a new reason, additional reason, different reason. And that's because Mr. Fleury, Trumpet editor in chief, like you said, has specifically said that Syria, this strong ally of not only Russia, but especially Iran, in the Middle East, a key part of Iran's strategy in the Middle East, would fall. And this is someone, Mr. Fleury is someone who has emphasized that Iran will grow more and more and more powerful. Since the 1990s, he's been writing that. And yet he specified that this kind of seemingly key part of Iran's power in the Middle East, would fall away from it and ally with an opposing power. So that makes it a kind of a unique and interesting prophecy. And so when it happened, you and I in the trumpet meetings and everybody else were just awed by it, expecting it, but still just awed by how quick the table turned there in Syria.
Yes, the pace was really, really eye-catching. And I think there's similarities in the Donald Trump election as well, in that there was a time where it looked like Mr. Fleury was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at he made those predictions. Well, the title of that 2012 article was How the Syrian Crisis Will End. And he was writing, it's going to end with Syria out of Iran's orbit. I mean, there were about 4 or 5 years there. It kind of looked like the Syrian civil war ended. And Syria was still firmly in Iran's orbit. And yeah, okay, it looked like it was wrong, but you'd be a little more patient. And very quickly, that prophecy that looked like a failed forecast became fulfilled prophecy in just about 2 weeks.
Right. It was dramatic. And again, I mean, Iran had every reason to keep that from happening. We talk about the Shia crescent, right? It's trying to extend its influence across a contiguous, geographically contiguous, not just theologically, but a geographically contiguous region with the point kind of pointing down toward Jerusalem. And you need Syria. They need Syria for so many different reasons. One of them is to supply Shia fighters, Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and all of that fell apart. Like the Syria fell away from Iran's orbit as Hezbollah was getting decimated by Israel, as Israel was decimating Hamas after October 7th, and so those related events were also happening in a dramatic way. And again, it was Iran's power being diminished in each of those cases, and that's just again a remarkable specificity to that prophecy, or to those prophecies that Mr. Fleury has mentioned, because if your main bet, so to speak, is that Iran's going to become a powerful entity that's going to push against its enemies and become so much different than it was in the 1980s or the early 1990s when Mr. Fleury was writing about Iran, then you probably wouldn't bet that this country will support Iran. This country won't. You wouldn't get so specific if you're just trying to make a wild bet. But the thing is, it's not a bet. It's not a prediction. It's it's a prophecy, and it's a right understanding of more than one prophecy relating to Iran and Syria.
There's so much in this issue that ties together. I'm kind of having a hard time not talking about everything all at once. But just those comments, I'll just mention this article we have, How Important is Prophecy to You by Mr. Brad McDonald, that I still want to get back to a few points from Mr. Fleury's, and maybe we'll come back to this one later. But this is such a fantastic article. Like, I think we've come back to this, you and I, and just even when I've been doing the show quite a few times. Like, Bible prophecy is practical. Bible prophecy is not just academic interest. And I remember when I was a teen, I think there was a book like The Bible Code that was doing, like, it was a bestseller. Someone claimed to have found a code in the Bible. I think all of that has been disproven, but it became a bestseller because people were really interested in having this hidden knowledge, this secret code in the Bible that they could understand. And Bible prophecy isn't simply about just having some secret knowledge and having that thrill and that immediate appeal. there are very practical things that it will do in your life. And that is why it's an important part of a Christian's diet. That's why it's a third of the Bible is Bible prophecy. Like, this is not just for those thrills. And this article does an excellent job of getting that across. And Mr. McDonald just even talks about some of his personal history with God and with the church and the role that Bible prophecy has in gaining his attention. But he has a section there, Prophecy Proves God. Here's a quote from Mr. Flurry's book, Unveiled at Last, the Royal Book of Revelation. The number one reason for prophecy is to show that God rules. I think it's Daniel 4 and verse 17 we end up coming back to quite a lot on this show that says the same thing, that this was about a specific prophecy, but God says that he gives it so that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men. And your point about the details goes in exactly to that. Like, that is part of the reason why God gets into all the details. It's not necessarily to force us to become experts in Oriental studies or the Middle East or to make us go through that. It's to point to him. Because, yeah, if it was more vague and like Iran is going to rise and that is it, like, yeah, okay, maybe that could be the work of a man. But when you make it really detailed like that, and it's like, okay, Iran is going to rise, but in this way, and actually it's going to fall here, and it's going to rise in this area, and that's how it's going. That is not a human forecast. And I think we talked even about, say, the Beirut blast, that you've got this explosion, and there were unforeseen events as well that tie into and play an important role on those. And I think even just the way that events have tied together has really surprised us in Syria. Like, you have these things that in hindsight, oh yeah, that's actually quite logically connected. Israel is beating Hezbollah. Russia is distracted with fighting in Ukraine. Israel is beating Iran. All of Syria's supports are gone. No wonder Assad fell. But I didn't see anyone kind of connect those dots ahead of time. So by being so specific, it fulfills the very purpose of prophecy in pointing to God's rule.
Right, and I'm glad we covered that in a feature article in this print edition. It follows on what you and I were talking about in the previous Trumpet World episode. He leads that article talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall and him being a young, I think he was 10 or 11 or so, and remembering his parents' reaction to that and the visceral, if that's the right word, or just certainly emotional, excited reaction to the fall of the Berlin Wall, because that was a specific prophecy that Herbert W. Armstrong had made, that Germany would reunite. Of course, the fall of the Berlin Wall was the beginning of reuniting Germany. And he uses that example, a really personal story there, to show like our reaction to Bible prophecy should be excited like that. It should be not only academic, not only I don't know, scientific or geopolitical, or the news entertains me and prophecy entertains me even more. It should be personal. It should be, as you just said, it should point to the God to whom the nations are a drop in a bucket, as the Bible describes them. And so that Berlin Wall night, that night that he describes in that article, we're having that now with Syria, in a very similar way. There's been a specific prophecy made, a specific prophecy on top of that specific prophecy made regarding Iran, and then on top of that Syria, and that has happened. And so that should excite us. It should have a personal effect on us. And I really think that that article is great at showing that added dimension that I think a lot of people who just follow the news, a lot of people who are even willing to take the step of saying, I believe Bible prophecy. I know most of my friends don't, or I don't see a lot of people talking about that, but I believe it. Well, you still have to go another step. You still have to let it change you, as you're talking about, and let it just, first of all, make your awe of the Creator God, the God of the Bible, expand massively, and just be in awe of that God.
I think part of the reason why I love these shows where we have you on as a guest, Philip, and talk about the trumpet print is, I think you make some good points, and then I it stirs all of these different thoughts in my mind, and we usually come into these with some kind of an outline, and this outline is completely out of the window at this point, because I wanted to bring up another article from Mr. Flurry that just, hearing the point that you make there, I think brings to mind that we were going to save to the end to talk about an open letter to the churches of God. And again, maybe we will kind of come back to this one, where this is about the work of Herbert W. Armstrong. And this is another practical point about Bible prophecy, that you look at the Bible, and again, we touched on this last time you were on the show, that God reveals through individuals, and he works through a clear government, and he works through one individual at a time. And in the days of the original apostles, okay, there were 12 apostles because they were all spread out and there wasn't a clear ease of communication, but there was still a hierarchy. There was still a chief apostle, and God works that way. And Bible prophecy points us to the one that God is working through. And the fall of the Berlin Wall was a signature prophecy of Herbert W. Armstrong. And I think Mr. McDonald goes through some of the quotes there where he, for years, was saying, again, very specifically, some of the countries behind the Iron Curtain are going to break away and they're going to join Europe. And he was saying this at the height of the Cold War. Some of those quotes, I think, were from the 50s. Like, part of looking back on Bible prophecy, like, things that happen seem obvious in hindsight, but you have to put yourself in the moment and understand how impossible some of these things seemed at the time. So this was a keynote prophecy. And first of all, seeing that happen points you to God. And then secondarily, it points you to who God is using. And Mr. Flurry says in this open letters to the churches of God, he talks about how God gave revelation to Mr. Armstrong, and that has continued today. God's given him revelation. He says that is the single greatest proof that the God who inspired Mr. Armstrong is behind our work. So it's about, it points us to God. It also points us to the man God is using. And that brings me back to the point I wanted to make about this first article, about the Syria article, that perhaps stood out to me more as someone involved in the nuts and bolts of news watching and assembling news reports and passing on article ideas and things like that, is that Mr. Flurry started the year talking about Syria quite a lot. And he makes this point in that article, that he had an article about Syria. There was some Key of David. I remember that first Key of David program that he gave about Syria. And my response was kind of like, where did that come from?
Right.
Like, there was nothing that had just happened that would, like, we would, if Trumpet World wasn't going then, but we would not have had a Trumpet World episode on Syria, or had like this week in review episode where we were just like, this big event just happened, now we're going to talk about, because that wasn't there. It kind of came from nowhere. Now, I think there was a smaller story behind it. I think he was watching, because of this Bible prophecy, for signs of Germany's involvement in Syria in the Middle East. That was there for at least, I think, one of those Key of Davids. And because most people don't have that guide of Bible prophecy, they're not looking for that. They don't have their attention on that. And so most people relegated that to an unimportant piece of news, whereas he saw that and went and gave the Key of David on it. But overall, those stories came from nowhere. And it really confirms this as, well, God is actively working through an individual. And then there's a church that backs that individual and a work that goes alongside it. But it's all about, well, God is speaking and he's using one man and he's revealing to one man. And ultimately, all the glory, everything goes to God. It all points to God. It's not about the man at all. But he's using a church for a purpose. He's training a church to do a work. And to get anything done, there has to be some hierarchy. There has to be a leader. And God uses Bible prophecy and the way that he reveals truth, to cement, to confirm, to back his leader up, and then to build and train the whole church. And so I think that came across really strongly to me from that Syria story too.
Well, that the way you connect those is really a good point. How you can't escape, if you're going to if you're going to see world events and then you're going to find out that someone said this world event would happen 12 years before or 20 years before or 28 years before, uh, then then in good faith, you're going to look for, well, where did that come from? How was that possible? Was that a guess? Were there lots of other guesses, in all kinds of different directions? And this is just one that happened to hit. Is this just a general thing like a power from the Middle East will rise, or is it Iran will be that power? It will control radical Islam. Syria, yes. Syria, no, but other nations, yes. And then, like you say, you can't even stop there, and you shouldn't in good faith. You should not stop there because it's just not logical. This came from somewhere. So we often emphasize that Bible prophecy is infallible. Not one word of it is wrong because it comes from the Creator God, and it's in the Bible to us as a gift for us to use. But also, just like you said, it throughout the Bible, it comes through someone in particular. And I don't think you get through any of these great men of the Bible without getting quite a lot of, wow, this was just a human man. This was right. There's a lot recorded about Abraham, Moses, that where they were just men, and what made them great was they were submitting to God, and He was able to, give that revelation through that man, a prophet or whatever it might be.
I think that's an important point. I was teaching Old Testament survey last year at our college, and this was a point that I kind of made to the students that if someone says like be like Abraham or follow Abraham's faith, like the Bible does, and sometimes it can feel a bit like being told like, well, be like Superman and fly and shoot lasers from your eyes, and it's like, well, no, I just can't do. You can tell me to do that, but that's just not possible. I can't do that. But the Bible does, like, it is really incredible to me how many of the flaws of these different individuals are recorded. And in so many cases, they overcome, they move beyond them. But God doesn't give us a list of supermen, or, they're not like the Greek heroes with strengths that are impossible to match. They are people just like us. And the big difference that made all the miracles that we look at them and say, I could never do that, was God's power. And then, the I could never do that is we can't. But we have access to the same power. And
right.
so,
And so in the same way with those men, it's all about God. It's the same thing for us. It's all about God and our relationship with God. Problem is, especially I think maybe in American Protestantism, or just Christianity in general, we want this general, yes, we believe in God, or yes, we believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. And those are not minor, statements to make, especially in today's world. It does take some courage to believe that and to live your life on that. But that is exceedingly general. And you cannot stop there, because the Bible that you trust in tells you cannot stop there. It tells you, I mean, like you said, it's filled with a third of prophecy. Jesus Christ, after whom Christians are named, was very much a prophet. And so you have to know, well, what were those prophecies? Were they fulfilled? Why are they in there in the first place? What do they mean? There are many explanations for among the subset of people who will actually believe in Bible prophecy. There are many explanations for what Christ meant by this, or Ezekiel meant by that, or Jonah meant by this. And so in this wilderness, in this chaos of explanations of the Bible, I mean, just put Bible or prophecy into YouTube and see what comes up. Just this wild garden of random thoughts about what prophecies mean. You have to, if you are going to be a Christian, if you are going to follow Jesus Christ, you have to find, where is he now? Where is he today? Where is he teaching? It turns out not just prophecy, but an entire way of life. And so the way that God connects those things and puts that requirement on us, um, if you really are in good faith pursuing the truth and willing to stand up for it and say that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, then you have to keep going, or you're going to be deceived. You're going to be, it's going to be for nothing. You've got to keep going until prophecy becomes personal, until the other teachings of the Bible become personal, until you achieve that same thing that Abraham and David achieved, was that submission to God, that willingness to submit to God. That's ultimately that's where a prophecy in your world news being fulfilled, that's where that is supposed to lead.
Well, I think that's a great segue to talk about some of all the fulfilled prophecy in this trumpet issue, with that important background in mind. One more point I think it's important to make on this Syria's fall, before we move on, is just to watch Germany's role there. I think that's where, like we were saying, you get into the details, and this is all based on prophecies in Psalm chapter 83 that ties in perfectly with Daniel 11, that was written hundreds of years later, but it's the same God behind it. What Mr. Fleury said was all informed by what is written there in Psalm chapter 83. That says, well, Germany is going to be the leader in form, or that Psalm 83 says that Germany is going to be forming this alliance or involved in this alliance. Other prophecies tell us that it's going to play a leading role in this alliance. So Mr. Fleury really gets into watch Germany there, which we may have had talked about on yesterday's Trumpet Daily. We're recording this before I've done the Trumpet Daily live, and I do have in my notes to talk a bit about some of the latest on Germany winning the race for Syria, but I don't always have time to get for that. But he still also concludes there with watch Iran and putting it in this broader prophetic context. And it finishes by offering his book Jerusalem in Prophecy, because really all of this revolves around Jerusalem. And then there are a couple of other follow-up articles that go along with that kind of round out the prophetic prophecy, that give us all of the details to point to God, that point to God and his power. I think we've kind of alluded to this one, the end of the axis of resistance by Mihailo Zekic, that does get to this, okay, well, you said Iran was going to dominate the region, but they've just been kneecapped. How does that happen? And he takes you through the prophesied answer to that, where the Bible lists who Iran's allies are going to be. And it doesn't say Syria, but it does say Egypt and Libya and Ethiopia. So that's a new direction for Iran. They've been putting a lot of their focus further north into Syria and into Lebanon. They've been defeated there. So this is what we can expect them to do. And this is in some ways what they're doing already. And we've seen, even since this went to print on Thursday, we were talking about the Iranian president going to Egypt and being welcomed into Egypt in a way that hasn't happened since the Islamists were in charge. So, this article talks about you could well see Egypt swinging behind Iran's orbit through a revolution, through a new government. That was another of our very popular shows that actually ended up doing quite well in Egypt itself, where we sat down with Mihailo and talked about all of the ingredients there for a potential revolution in Egypt. But I think certainly you see in the president's visit that Iran is focusing on Egypt. One way or another, they see, well, we're stopped in Syria. We still have this desire to dominate sea lanes and sea gates. And so now we're going to shift our focus into Egypt and into North Africa as another way to reach that end goal. And then the final article that is kind of this supporting piece here is Turkey's Sacred Quest by Josué Michels. And maybe we'll have to have him on the show to talk about this one in more detail. I thought this was a great little article that focuses in on Turkey's role here. He focuses on a quote from that same 2012 article from Mr. Fleury that says Turkey has also been aligned with Iran, but it too is going to side with Germany in the future. Why? Because it disagrees with what Iran is doing in Syria. While Iran supports Assad's regime, Turkey supports the rebels. And Turkey really is a key partner for Germany as it moves into the Middle East. It's been a key partner in history, World War I in particular. Germany really worked a lot through Turkey to try and push British influence out of the Middle East and even out of India. And there's a history repeating itself, but this is something, Turkey working side by side with Germany, something that Mr. Fleury has talked about, something that Bible prophecy has talked about, and something that we have seen happen. And this weekend's Key of David show talked about the way that you had some significant arms deals between Germany and Turkey, and they used to have a really close relationship. It has been a little bit more rocky over the last few years, and they kind of made up right before everything went down in Syria. And the role that this would have then played in Turkey going in there and getting rid of Assad, and even how some of those drone systems that you saw being used to unseat Assad, that Germany is the one supplying crucial parts for those. That is another important article to round out the prophetic picture of the Middle East.
Right, and I think those are both good examples, like the cover story on Syria, of the fact that that right now, in this moment, as you watch this, dear viewer, you are coming after a lot of fulfilled prophecy, and you're coming before a lot of fulfilled prophecy. There are prophecies yet unfulfilled that we're watching. You know, okay, Turkey's doing this, Turkey's doing that. You know, how much does that really matter? Well, we're looking for a dramatic fulfillment in Turkey, just like we're looking ahead to a dramatic fulfillment in Syria. So I think those articles taken as a whole show the whole picture and kind of help us kind of pinpoint where we are in that progression. Because, like I said, there's some that's happened and there's some that's about to happen.
Well, talking about some that have happened, I think this is probably a good time to jump to the infographic that I think is just a fantastic little summary there. It is 10 fulfilled Bible prophecies, where we've just tried to focus on 10, and I think there's a bonus list of another 10 just covered very briefly of prophecies that have been fulfilled. And what I love about this is it is so specific. This isn't I think Notre Dame, say, has done massive discredit to the idea of that he'll make this statement, in the distant future a man will bend with the wind or something, and then you'll get the Daily Mail or Daily Express headline like Notre Dame is fulfilled, and it's an incredibly tenuous connection, and the picture is so vague anyway. And this is so very different to that. So number one, Donald Trump will return to the presidency. You couldn't 50 years into the future vaguely say, oh, that just happened because of a vaguely related event. Vladimir Putin will conquer more territory. That was based on a statement Mr. Fleury made in 2008. Russia's attacks on Georgia in August might mark the beginning of a dangerous new era in history. This was the first military strike of a rising Asian superpower. He talked about a particular prophecy in Ezekiel 38 and said that this would mean they'd probably conquer more nations of the former Soviet Union. This was before a lot of people were... I mean, the idea of invading a neighboring country was pretty outlandish. Like, that wasn't done. You remember the squeals of outrage? John Kerry said it was 19th century behavior when Russia invaded Crimea. This was years before that, saying, they are going to conquer more territory, and sure enough, they did.
Yeah, again, the specificity here is remarkable. Again, we've talked about this before, but that word prophecy conjures up some different things in people's minds, and Nostradamus is a good example of what human prophecy is. It's a man guessing, but if God is trying to use prophecy to shake you and to help you to live your life a different way, then one of the things that only he can do, and that he makes that point in the Bible, only I can do this, is tell you specifically what the future will hold. And then he gives that through one man, as you were saying earlier, so that you can prove it, and so that it's not general. It doesn't come out of a committee. It doesn't come out of a I don't know, college of cardinals. It doesn't come out of a group. It comes from one man, and then that man, is just a conduit, transmitter, a from God to people. But that helps you nail it down, right? That helps you, the fact that that so much of it came through Herbert W. Armstrong, the fact that since then, since he died, it's come through Mr. Flurry. That helps you, uh, that helps us to nail it down and to prove it. And so this spread, I'm looking at it now, 10 fulfilled Bible prophecies, right there in the center of the trumpet is a good example of that. The third one there is one I wanted to make a comment on. The radical left will assault America's moral foundations. That's another thing where it's like, well, clearly they, you know, anyone who's been alive over the past, 15 years or whatever has just been definitely noticed that the radical left made an outright assault on the traditions of America and its morals. I remember specifically that we were in Jerusalem at the time, and Mr. Flurry was as well, and we had a chance to have dinner with him. And the thing that was just on his mind very much was the vice presidential debate between Paul Ryan and Joe Biden, and he just kept saying there's something like the Democratic Party has changed. They are radical. Like the radicalization is it's not just Democrat, it's radical. Um, and he kept, like you're saying, it kind of came out of the blue. I mean, there was the vice presidential debate, but to the rest of us, it was politics as usual. But again, the specificity that you emphasize, Brexit, Britain leaving the European Union, right? China taking over Seagates. Go back and remember what it was like in 2012 or 2008 or, before these things. I can remember, like, it was not self-evident. It was not inevitable. It was not a fact of life. It was not, that's going to be in the history books. There were all kinds of other things that could have happened, but these are the ones that have happened, and the ones that, again, not only the Bible, but a specific person who explains the prophecies of the Bible. Very risky thing to do, a very easy thing to mess up. These are the things that he said the Bible means, and then compare it to the world events that have happened subsequent.
And this is partly why I kind of encourage you, everyone, to like read and study these prophecies in advance so that you can watch them happen. Because I think it is more impactful to do that than to look back in hindsight, because you forget. And going back to this number 3 one, the radical left will assault America's moral foundations. My memory of this forecast is this kind of quotes what Mr. Flurry wrote about the 2006 midterm elections. This is when Nancy Pelosi was elected, and he said this is going to be a real turning point. And then 2008, Barack Obama was elected, and Mr. Flurry had a lot to say about how significant that was. And I was a student, and I was just kind of starting out doing some work as a student in the news bureau. And I remember a lot of commentators that are very smart people that I would really respect in 2008 when Barack Obama was being elected, saying, look, we need to remember a sense of proportion. We need to remember this isn't the end of the world. Like, our side always says, or every side, they always say this is the most important election in history, and this guy is the most dangerous, this guy is the most radical, but it's not really true. And we can't get carried away. Like, okay, Barack Obama's been elected, and we'll have a Democrat in the White House for at least 4 years, and we're not going to like it, but let's not make too big of a deal about it. Like, don't get carried away here. It's not some turning point. And it was so much of a turning point. It sounds a bit silly what I'm saying now, but there were literally people writing this.
Right.
It was very, very common. And it was kind of like, don't get carried away with what they're saying on Fox News, because Fox News was right wing back then. It was, very much, this is not a big deal. And now in hindsight, and in some ways, it is still a little hard to see how big of a turning point 2006, 2008 was, because we have gotten so used to the new normal where homosexual marriage is no longer radical or unusual anymore. But how much has America changed since then? So I think, like this one, when I saw that, it feels a little more less specific than the others, but then you read the text, you get back into some of those statements, and I think it's like, yeah, that is just as specific.
Right, right. And that's a good point, and that's why it kind of caught my eye too. Um, and it seems like this just overall trend. But like you say, it's important to read the prophecies and to know them before they happen, because then the full effect, hits when it does happen. If you had been reading the Trumpet in 2012, if you'd been watching the Key of David earlier this year, and you had kind of the same question, like, why are we talking about Syria right now? The world news, and it's not on any of the world news. It's not leading any of the nightly news programs. It's not just this silo of Bible prophecy here and Christian living over here. And like, this is the whole way of life. And this is what you see in the Bible. You see a lot of prophecy. You see a lot of commands about how to raise your family, about how to uh, have your marriage, about how to run your nation. Like, it's everything. Everything in human life traces back to the creator of human life. And I think this spread kind of communicates that as well, because it's everything from, alliance with Iran to, uh, Brexit, like we said, to, disease epidemics, to the British royal family specifically, to like we were just talking about, the morals of America in particular. And I remember Mr. Armstrong has some quote somewhere where he says something like, understanding the Bible really is having a basic understanding of everything. Like, God is giving you the knowledge of prophecy, not, as you keep saying, not for its own sake, but so that, like in other areas of life, you will change your life. You will come into a closer relationship with that creator. You will be more in awe of him, not for its own sake, but because he is awesome, and it's inaccurate to not understand that. But God gives us these ones, and tells us what they mean and how they're connected to each other and how it connects back to him. And it just makes you realize that, oh, I have something to do. I have a role to play. I have this what I do matters. I'm not just someone who watches the world news and just, it's maybe entertained by it, maybe afraid of it. But there's something I can do. In fact, there's something I must do based on uh, these prophecies.
And I'd like to pick that up and talk more about what you can do in just a little bit. But I want to get back to some of what you were saying a little bit before then, because I think that leads us nicely into another article here. That, one of the other things that Bible prophecy does is point us back to cause and effect. It helps show us, well, these are the causes. This is the effect that it will bring, and there's a promise of correction in a lot of Bible prophecy, and a promise of, you do things in a certain way, then this is going to be the outcome. And sometimes God says, well, I'm going to add on curses, but he says, even without that, it's going to be negative. And Bible prophecy highlights the role that human nature plays in world events, that human nature is basically evil, that it is Satan's nature. And what we see in the world today is a result of that cause. And another article from Mr. Flurry in this print edition is The Mystery of Civilization, that kind of gets back to the root causes of why the world is the way it is. And Bible prophecy shows us, well, where this world is going, where it's going to lead, how it's going to degenerate, what happens when you have homosexual marriage, quote unquote, where that is going to take your nation. But to also get the full picture of that, we need to go back to the beginning and see, well, how did we get to this point? How did we start on this journey? And so this article it's only 3 pages. It's a pretty brief but profound article that looks at the causes of why the world is the way it is. And this brings in a lot of then hope that Bible prophecy is about how God is going to deal with the causes, change the causes, how he is going to intervene and change human nature so that we don't just keep going through the same cycles again and again as we repeat the same problems again and again and again. And we kind of, collectively, we put our hand on the stove as a humanity, we get burned, we take it off, the next generation forgets and does the same thing, and we're just constantly harming ourselves. And God says, well, I'm going to address the cause of that, and I'm going to bring about a solution.
Right. I think this is another example of how many things the Bible covers and how it just energizes and brings to life your understanding of history, of current world events. Because it can just civilization. It seems to be like the most broad possible topic, but when you understand what this article says, that the human civilization comes out of it's made up of human beings, and this is why human beings are the way they are. This is why our nature, our characteristics are what they are. He traces it right back to the source, and then applies that to human groups and human civilization, the largest of the human groups. And it's very logical, it's very, very biblical, and it changes how you look at history. If I was not aware of what articles like this say and point to, and the importance of the scriptures that it cites, the Bible history that it cites, then I just wouldn't be interested in world news. I would not, and I'd probably not be all that interested even in history, because it's just so much, and it's just so random, and I would feel very incapable of affecting any of it. And but knowing this information, knowing this history, this Bible history, this is why the Bible starts this way. This is why it has so much detail about this. This is why it specifies this, because these are the seeds of our entire human history, our entire human civilization. Then it makes history and ongoing present history, current events, exciting.
I mean, this is a point that Mr. Hilliker gets to in his commentary at the end of the magazine as well, where he says prophecy is God's way of showing you the end result of your actions. For disobedience to his way, his prophesies suffering and death. For obedience, he prophesies joy and long life. It is a matter of cause and effect, which gets to exactly what you're saying just then about, well, it's practical. What can you do? Well, yeah, maybe you're not the president. Odds are that you listening to this are not. But you can affect the course of your life, and you can choose the way of life that leads to blessings for your life, and maybe bring even those in with your family. And then, well, God has a plan, and who will allow people to work with and affect the whole world. And you please remember this magazine, the quip to that article is, it may be a matter of life and death. And it talks about, well, can you recognize the God of love behind these prophecies? And there really is a plea to people to act on them. It says, undoubtedly, there will be people familiar with God's warnings. There will be people like you who read God's prophecies in the Bible and the trumpet, but who do not act on them until they see some of the worst prophecies actually happening. They will witness the nightmarish fulfillment step by step of what they have read: economic disaster, encirclement by enemies, civil war, cities destroyed by weapons of mass destruction. They will finally recognize that the God of love warned them. They will turn to him in heartfelt repentance. When they do, God will mercifully protect them from further harm. They will even live to see the fulfillment of an even greater prophecy, the return of Jesus Christ and the dawn of the kingdom of God. So, all of this is for a very positive reason, but we can bring that positivity into our lives by changing and by acting on the warning sooner. And who wants to wait to bring positive change into their lives? Change is often hard, but taking action sooner brings blessings in sooner and means that we don't need as much correction. So that's I think, a very practical, powerful way that Mr. Hilliker concludes the magazine with that commentary there.
Right. And this is why we were born. I mean, we deep down, a lot of us yearn to have a purpose, to have, you know, why, you know, that's something Mr. Armstrong explained so well. It's like, why do we find ourselves with these amazing, dazzling human minds, but clearly there's deep flaws in these minds that we have. You know, what does it all mean, and why is why do human beings act the way they do? Civilizations develop the way they do, and we want to make a difference in our own lives. We want to make a difference for our family. We want to have a good effect on other people, um, you know, in our nation or in our groups. Um, and then we race off and we do it based on our own human reason. You know, we try to do all that. The presidents of all the nations do that based on their own human minds. Which, as I have the kindergarten Bible class, and I just keep telling them, like, that civilization article gets back to these two choices, these two general approaches, ways of life. One is following God and obeying God and submitting to God and doing what you don't want to do because God wants you to do it. That's the hard part. And the other, it's not called the tree of death. It's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that's kind of enticing. And that's what it is. It's this, I will make my own decisions. I will be the judge of that. And so this is about sacrificing that way of thinking and choosing this way of submission, this way of recognizing that God is not only the God of the physical creation, including human beings, but also a Bible prophecy, which means A, he cares about human beings, and B, he has the power to affect and to forecast what human beings will do thousands of years in the future. That can, if you begin to understand that, and if you begin to let go of your own will and your own control of your own life and accept God's control, then you're fulfilling the purpose for which you were born, and that inner need that we have is fulfilled. And so I think that commentary just really helps you understand, again, as we keep saying, the purpose of prophecy, the fact that you sitting at home thinking, oh, this is kind of interesting, this is kind of unique, this is kind of entertaining, or whatever, might actually think, you know what, I need to change what I'm doing. I need to live differently. I need more teaching. I need more instruction about how to watch world events, but also how to be married, how to be a father. Uh, because again, it all comes back. The creator of prophecy is the creator of human beings. He's the creator of male and female and marriage. And so it all must lead us back to him and our relationship with him, which is not just, yes, I recognize he exists, but as the examples of the Bible show, an ongoing sacrifice and submission to what he wants. And then he will show us, he will guide us, and he will, like you're saying, he will give us a fulfilling, meaningful, exciting, and happy life if we'll do that.
And talking of that meaningful, fulfilled, happy life, the last kind of section I wanted to talk about is that look at our work that we've got in this magazine. Just before we get there, I wanted to give a brief shout out to this article we have, 10 Ways Russia's Invasion Changed Germany Militarily. Normally, we have authors come on the show and talk about an article that they've written, and that article becomes an episode or a segment on Trumpet World. This, I think, is the first that's gone the other way around, where over the summer we had Joshua Michels in, and the two of us talked about 10 ways that Germany had already been radically transformed since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And that went on to become an article. So hopefully the first of several more as we move in that other direction too. But you introduce this segment that has a lot of pictures and detail on all the other aspects of the Philadelphia Church of God, the work behind the trumpet and Trumpet World. And you have an article, I'll Look at Our Work. And perhaps you could summarize that and talk a bit about why we have this section in the magazine.
Sure. Yeah. It's the main reason was because it's the 35th anniversary, and I tell you, I do the PCG news for PCG members. Philadelphia Church of God is the publisher of the Trumpet. So we compile, the news of the week in the different departments and things, and and tell the members as much as we can about what has happened this week and what's going to happen next week, because we really actually do believe that the members praying about it changes outcomes in the departments, opens doors that wouldn't otherwise open. So this is kind of a PCG news article in the Trumpet that's recognizing the 35th anniversary. But as we were researching this, as we were just like heading into the anniversary, which was on December 7th, 1989, as it was when the Philadelphia Church of God was founded. But as we were heading into it, I was going through all these old pictures from the early days, and I just and people I talked to as well who didn't have the opportunity to go through all the old, the very first Philadelphia Newses and the very first Philadelphia Trumpet, which functioned as a Philadelphia News. Other people were just had the same kind of feeling that I did, like, we are excited about this anniversary. This is something to celebrate. Like, this is so great what God has raised up. And so with all that in mind, just being in a very, and it was more than nostalgic, but we could use that word if we want to. Feeling going into that anniversary, and then talking about it in the Trumpet meetings, we were talking about, we need to show the work. This is a good opportunity to show the work that's behind the trumpet. And putting this together, I tell you, it was like, what a message there is coming out of God's church, God's work. There's the trumpet, which is a world of news, no pun intended, and prophecy, and like we were just saying, more than that, how it should affect your life and principles of living and so forth. And yet that's only one part of this rapidly growing work. I mean, you and I both know that the opportunities come and the needs, just entire new projects just open up faster than you can do the ones you've already been assigned. And we tried, and I think failed, to give at least a glimpse of the many things that are happening at church headquarters and around the world with the congregations, and to show that the message from this work isn't just, for example, Syria will fall away from Iran and not be allied with Iran anymore. And then see, we were right about that. Like, that is the contact point. That is the thin edge of a wedge, a massive wedge of prophecy and more prophecy and more prophecy, but how to live, like we were just talking about, how to educate, how to govern, like just this whole way of life that's in the Bible, this whole civilization, a right civilization, is reflected in God's church and in God's work right now. And so we're trying to show that. We're trying to give a glimpse into the work of the church. And I mean, some people read the trumpet for a long time and not realize, that some other major thing, oh, the Trumpet Daily. Oh, I guess I didn't realize that, there's a Trumpet Daily program. So, I mean, we want to get all those things in front of the reader and make them aware of the breadth and the growth of the work, because behind this message of, this is how you should raise a family, right? It's not just theory or a clever way of writing, or just or even a brilliant human mind. Behind it is an entire way of life, showing by example over decades and generations what happens when you live that way of life. And so that's one of the things that we tried to reflect in these humble pages. I'm looking at them right now, and they just, as they said, they don't do it justice at all, but it gives you at least this kind of glimpse, at least, if you aren't aware that there's this entire cultural effort, musical, performing arts, and master classes, and all these types of things. Or if you weren't aware that Celtic Throne exists, and why, or personal appearance campaigns, or whatever it might be, at least this helps you be aware. And one thing that I'm just working on and hoping for, and needing miracles for, is to do a better job of showing what already exists in this work, what's already happening, fast paced in all kinds of directions and at all ages, what's happening in God's work. And we want to show that. We want to get people excited about it. But I mean, first step is just to get it accurately reflected. And there's just so much going on that we really need to do a lot more of this. But at least this gives you the tiniest initial glimpse of a glance at the volume of projects and opportunities and things that are going on in the Philadelphia Church of God, which is the publisher of the Trumpet.
And I think in some ways, it almost brings us full circle. Like back to where we started. Bible prophecy points to God, but the fruits, the work that God has accomplished through his church, it all points to God as well. That's what this is all about. Like it's a work that's a miracle, that everything that has happened over the last 35 years or more, when you look back at the history of the church, I mean, God's history of the church in the last 2,000 years is always a history full of miracles. It's all his doing, and he works through human instruments, but that's out of love for us as much as anything else, as he uses that opportunity to train and develop people. But this is so this points to God, and then the church is to be an example of God's way of life and putting that into practice. Okay, this is what the way of give looks like, and this is how we try to give to people here, and here. And so I do think it is great to get that look there, and people have sometimes asked about, well, what was the church behind Trumpet Hour? This gives you a full color look at that, and about all these other educational endeavors, all of these different offices all around the world, the presence around the world, but all of it points to God. But I did want to finish by just coming back to Mr. Flurry's article, An Open Letter to the Churches of God, where there is an important and sobering point, I think, to this letter, that we don't go big on, say, the hard sell on this show. We're never up here saying, well, give your heart to the Lord and come join our church. And we even make a point of, when we send, if you request the literature, we absolutely do not believe. We believe it will be wrong for us to follow that up with kind of high pressure tactics to try and get you to donate or to come to services or something like that. We don't do that. We believe that only God the Father can call people into his church. And if we try and do that, and if we try and pressure people into the church, it's only going to end in disaster. That we get the message out there, only God calls. But God did have a massive work going under Herbert W. Armstrong, and there are a lot of people out there that God did call that have now fallen away. And this article, we mentioned it earlier, but it directly addresses those people because they are in a different category. They have been called. And a lot have drifted away from that calling or gone on to other things. Or after Mr. Armstrong died, the church that he led, or that Jesus Christ was the head of that church, but again, he works through men, that church decided to go a different way. It rejected everything that he stood for. And there's a lot of people that followed that or gave up or got confused or went in all kinds of different directions after that happened. And Mr. Flurry has that article because, if that's you, there's an important message to you in that article as well, that God still called you, and that there is a work that still needs to be done. And yes, it's a work of a miracle, but God works through human beings, and how those human beings work and submit to him can affect how quickly that work gets done. 2 Peter chapter 3 talks about hastening the return of Jesus Christ. And so if you have been called to do that and maybe walked away from your calling, God's work needs your support. And this article is for you and reaches out. And Mr. Flurry writes there and concludes with the same point that I just made, that you can look and you can see God's work points to God. You can see, well, where is the same God that was behind Mr. Armstrong? And he concludes that article, we hope you can clearly identify the same miracles and blessings that built Mr. Armstrong's work. And I think that comes across from the pictorial that you put together. If you know Mr. Armstrong's work, we're doing it the same way he did it, just as God inspired Joshua to look back to Moses and say, well, we're just going to do things the same way Moses did because God told Moses to do it that way and God hasn't changed. Well, we do it the same way that he did it. And then it says, most of all, we hope and pray that you can recognize the work of the God of Elijah. Our time in this age of man is fast running out. God is growing much more urgent in trying to reach his sons who have turned away from him because eternal life hangs in the balance. We urge you to respond to him. And so there's also, I think, that for that smaller segment, there is a powerful call to action in this magazine that I wanted to make sure we got across in our review of it.
Right. God is demonstrating. God is demonstrating with the return of Donald Trump, with the fall of Syria, with what has been happening in Turkey and what's about to happen in Turkey and Iran and Europe. He is demonstrating himself, his power, his confirmation of prophecies and prophecies as explained by Mr. Gerald Flurry, as explained by Herbert W. Armstrong. He is demonstrating in his work and how it's done that he's still here. He's still there. He's still the same. And it's not a matter of idolizing Mr. Armstrong. This is the work that kept doing what he taught after he died, after he was dead and gone, right? It wasn't following a man because it followed the same thing that was being taught after that man was gone, and everyone just kind of either drifted from it or rejected it or in some cases actively tore it down, much like Barack Obama actively tore down the United States from the inside, from the top. God is not just telling you, not just giving you this article to read or television show to watch and then be convicted, which could be enough in and of itself. But he is demonstrating an entire way of life that you can't just make up. You can't just do it with, a $1 billion sponsor or certain government inside government contacts or, other human ways. You cannot build a work like this over these past 35 years. This exists. And in good faith, if you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, this exists, you've got to account for it. You've got to explain it. And for some of our Trumpet World viewers, they know where it came from. And I really hope that open letter, that if you read nothing else, if you're familiar with the work of Herbert W. Armstrong, and you know that it wasn't all about Herbert W. Armstrong, the man, then I hope you read, even right now online, an open letter to the churches of God from Mr. Flurry, because that is maybe the most important thing you could read right now.
Well, thank you so much for that conclusion, Philip, and for joining us today. Thank you to George Haddad and Isaac Lorenz for engineering and production. Oh, an exciting announcement at the end. We will be going live. We're going to start shifting live for our Friday Trumpet Week in Review shows. We've gotten fed up of recording on Thursday only to have the news changed by Friday morning and more Bible prophecy being fulfilled. So that will be at 8:30 this Friday in that's Central Standard Time in the US, 2:30 Greenwich Mean Time. If you're somewhere else, you can do the maths. And we will be live on YouTube and Rumble. So if you're around, please do join us then. If not, the show will be still available for you to come and listen to and watch at your convenience. And until then, keep watching your world.